Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Talking Triathlon, a podcast where Tim Ford, that's me, speaks to James Bale, that's him, all about the sport of triathlon. And Jimbo, we are what a buffet of triathlon there is this week to discuss.
It's an onslaught, isn't
It's
it?
an onslaught.
It's an onslaught of triathlon related news just coming at us real quick.
It has been a relatively quiet week this week, but it's all good because we got plenty to talk about, mate. How are you going? What's happening?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm not too bad, mate. It's we're in that sort of wind down to Christmas period. Everything's starting to feel a little bit like we should just stop in all aspects of life. I'm trying not to stop entirely, but it's a bit early to be feeling like this, but I think it's just been a long year with a lot of stuff that's happened, and I feel like I want to switch the world off and disappear for a little bit and have some Christmas time. How are you, man?
I'm good, thanks. I'm 1 week into my 2 weeks off training break, so I feel a bit disgusting, which is I think most of our listeners who do the sport can probably relate to when you literally go from training 20 hours a week to not even I haven't even run across the road lately. I don't think I've done absolutely nothing. Uh, I went for a walk the other day, which is a very out of character for me because I absolutely hate walking.
So you're
But
having 2 solid weeks of nothing.
yeah, 2 weeks completely off training, I think, and then that's the plan, and then start to build back up again for next year, which is nice. It's been nice to start to feel a bit rested and hopefully have a bit of a hard reset and attack 2025 with the got that big race in America now. I've entered that race in July, so start working towards that one. So that'll be good. I think it's important. I think a lot of athletes, probably amateurs in particular, don't do that enough. Like take a good couple of weeks off every like every coach I've ever worked with has always had me do it. So I do it every year. But I think this year I think I did it in September last year or August last year. So it's actually been over a year since I did it. That's why I think it was probably time for it because I definitely know, despite obviously with everything else that our patrons know about, but don't need to be spoken about publicly. That plus this, it was just like the perfect time to actually decide to shut things down, take a bit of a breather, which is nice. But yeah, other than that, mate,
It's important.
yeah,
Compartmentalizing your time is important. Otherwise, you feel like you always feel like you should be doing something, and that's not good for the brain.
I just even think with the sport, like I know that many triathletes are guilty of taking it a bit too serious. And the second, I do this because I enjoy it and it helps keep me healthy and stuff. And the moment that it actually starts to feel like a chore, it's like, okay, let's reset a little bit because I think I see so many triathletes, amateurs who will come in, burn bright and leave. And, I've been in the sport for over a decade now, and I'd like to be in the sport for another decade. So I think that it is important to, yeah, when you do start to feel a little bit like your hobby becomes a bit like a job, even though it's not my job. That's when it's time to sort of back things off a little bit and just take a breather and get that hunger back. And it's funny because I think I always know how bad I've needed a break based on at what point into my break do I start to miss the training. And like I'm a week in, not fucking missing it at all. I'm still very happy not to be swimming, biking, and running, which tells me that I probably needed a break. I think last time I did it, it was like day 12 of 14. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm ready to get back into it. So yeah, I think it's again something that, so if you're listening, I encourage everybody to take it. Not like months. I think people go the other way too, where they'll just take like 2 months off completely.
Oh yeah, we're back when I started training. The off season was winter. You know, it was just it was just train from spring through to summer and a bit of autumn, some racing in autumn, and then winter came, and you were just like, oh fuck, eat stuff.
I suppose it's probably a little bit different for you being in the UK compared to being in Australia because, like, I think our winters are horrible and freezing, but they're probably similar to your summers. So it's not fair because it's very easy for me to train. Like I can ride outside year round. I can swim year round. I can run outside year round. I do swim indoors in winter just because, like I said, I'm a coward and I hate the cold. But yeah, so it's probably a little bit easier for us than it is for a lot of people. But
I'm
yeah,
just loving the treadmill at the moment. I'm just on the treadmill,
it's,
loads.
you can. But I saw a thing the other day, and it was. Have you seen the movie Interstellar? There's
Yeah,
that planet they go to for our non-movie fans. I know me and James talk about movies a lot, actually, but there's that planet they go to where it's like 1 minute or 1 hour on this planet is 7 years on Earth. So it's them on the planet, and then it's also a person on a treadmill. Well, that's pretty accurate actually, because yeah, fuck the treadmill. I'll do some intervals, like maybe one a week or one a fortnight. But other than that, give me the outside, give me outside running.
I've found a way to
What are you
to
watching?
trick the treadmill time along,
What are you watching?
and it's Haribo. I give
Okay,
myself a little Haribo sweet every 2.5 minutes. Not 2.5 minutes, sorry. That would be ridiculous.
that would be
Every
rude.
10 minutes when I use it as fuel.
No, it's
So I
good.
give myself a little Haribo sweet every 10 minutes and it helps the time go by.
Well, if you want to find out our other genius hacks and nutrition tips, you can head to patreon.com/ talking triathlon, where you can sign up for $5 a month. We said this last week, and for people who maybe skipped it, we are taking 3 weeks off over Christmas. So from I think the 20th is going to be the last episode, and then 3 weeks off until the week starting the 13th of January. But we're going to put out 3 episodes for our patrons over that period. So if you want to keep the content going over the Christmas break, head to patreon.com/ talking triathlon, even if you just sign up for the month of December, to get that that content to keep coming. We'll also do a regular bonus episode for November, and then yeah, the 3 episodes that will come out during December for our patrons. Jimbo, as we
One
said it,
big day of ordering coming up for us, eh?
yeah, and I already know one of the episodes we're going to do, because one of our patrons requested it, is we're going to do a deep dive into Alistair Brownlee's career. So we're going to talk about Ali's career from when he started through, talk about the Olympic races, then we'll talk about some of those iconic ITU performances and stories we love, through to the transitional long course and stuff like that. So that's definitely going to be one. So again, if you guys have any ideas for what you'd like us to talk about, this is probably more for our patrons. Put it in the WhatsApp group. Let us know what you'd like us to cover over those bonus episodes. We can talk about anything. So tell us what you want. Maybe we'll do a
Yeah,
Q&A.
it can be,
I
it's
don't
an
know.
opportunity to request a deep dive into something that isn't time stamped for now, where we can talk about anything in the history of the sport.
Yeah, or like I said, we can do Q&As. We can talk about James's choice of tri-suit, all that good stuff. I said at the start, mate, that it is a lean week for triathlon news, and it is getting towards the end of the year. So we have thought about what we're going to do. We've got 3 episodes left this year, including this one. So I thought I'd give us the game plan, and then we can get stuck into it. What we are going to do, because we like to do our Talking Triathlon podcast awards every year. We are going to This year, we're going to do a bit of a recap. We're going to talk about the things that have happened in 2024, some of the races that we really liked, despite what some people think. We do actually watch them all. We're also going to talk about some of the things we didn't like, some of the performances, some of the just the things that I guess, and there's probably not going to be a lot of structure to it. We're just going to have a chat about how this year has gone, where we're at. And then next week, we're going to do a preview of 70.3 Worlds, as well as announce the nominees for the podcast awards. And we will then I'll set up a voting thing so all of our listeners can go on the link and vote. And then the week after, we will do a 70.3 Worlds recap, as well as the winners. And then that will be it for the year. So that is I guess, the plan for the next 3 weeks. I hope everybody is okay with that. And yeah, Jimbo, 2024, the year that was. What are some of your general thoughts about 2024 in professional triathlon?
It was an interesting year, wasn't it? Because we had the sort of, I know the T100 has existed for a while before this, but this was their kind of true coming out party for the sort of like the proper series with designated races, the branding. It was all hyped up for this year. So that was running alongside the first year of the Ironman Pro Series. So we had this kind of, these two entities with which to judge each other against. And I think, in my opinion, the biggest takeaway I've got from T100 versus Ironman Pro Series is they're two very different entities that gave us very different things. And even comparing them is probably a little bit pointless, because what I got from the T100 was totally different from what I got from the Ironman Pro Series.
Yeah. No, I think that I probably also expected them to be a bit more similar. And you're right, they've very much, very naturally sort of evolved into their own thing. Uh, some better than others. Like I'd say T100 does some things better than the Pro Series. The Pro Series does some things better than the T100 series. They've both got their pros and cons. I agree that I think that if we had to here we are in December, sort of with hindsight. If I had to define 2024, or even say what I think is the most significant thing to the sport, especially at the start of the year, I would have said it would be the T100 series. Um, Here we are in December, and I'd probably say maybe not. I'd say maybe it is a bit more of the two of them together. I think, yeah, I definitely think that I expected the T100 series to probably have more of an impact than the Pro Series did. I thought the Pro Series would be very similar to just what's happened in the past, but just with a different paint, coat of paint. I think here we are, to me, it hasn't been. And that's not to say that T100 has underwhelmed me, and it's probably more that the Pro Series surprised me more. I think the Pro Series has actually, I think it's been quite a big success in a lot of ways. I mean, some things like the race on the weekend, the Ironman Western Australia coverage was fucking horrific. It was brutal to behold. And I think that like that sort of thing has definitely put the T100 broadcast by comparison makes it look a lot better. But yeah, no, I think that the two have been a lot closer than I probably expected at the start of the year.
Yeah, I see it as serving two different masters. I think the T100 is much more about capturing people's consistent viewing, you
Hmm.
know, trying to supply people with a constant cast of characters, as constant as they can get it. Wrapping up these races as key events throughout the year for people to go and watch, kind of in a similar vein to how F1 does it. Whereas the Ironman Pro Series, I see it more as a vehicle for the athletes to work with and work within, and it's less about providing that constant cast of characters. It's sort of event in, event out, and giving people the viewing experience. It's more about a vehicle for the athletes to compete against each other, to earn a bit more money, for their racing to be slightly better showcased, but not as showcased as the T100 is doing. I just don't see them competing in the same sort of arena.
It's funny though, because I would actually say like, and it's weird, right? Because I think you're 100% correct, but and probably more applicable to the women's pro series than the men's. But I feel like the women's Ironman Pro series actually had a fairly consistent cast of characters at a lot of races. Like you look, like an athlete like Kat Matthews, right? I actually think Kat Matthews has had the best season of any athlete. Like if I had to pick my athlete of the year at this stage, it's Kat Matthews, not because she's won the big race, but because she's been so consistent at fucking everything she's done this year, mate. Like, she has been there or thereabouts, and she's balanced. Like she's going to win the Pro Series. She was what, fourth overall in the T100 series. Like that's something that we thought at the start of this year would be impossible. But the point I was making is, if I look at the women's start list, there were a lot of names that were consistently on that start list. The Kylie Simpsons, the Fenella Langridges, the Lottie Wilms, the Hannah Berries, the oh my God, I'm having doesn't matter. There was a lot of the same names on most of the start lists. Like, and I actually feel like the T100 women's start list in particular was extremely volatile and extremely
Yeah.
inconsistent. So by comparison, yeah, I actually thought the Ironman Pro Series, but even in the men's a bit, like there were a lot of this. I mean, every start list that comes out, Cam Murphy's on it for every fucking Ironman race that exists. It seems that guy just enters everything. But the Christian Hogenhags, the Gregory Barnabys, the Braden Curries, the Joe Skippers, at least for the first, like Matt Hansen's. Like there was an element of consistency to the Pro Series, and I think the major difference is that the Pro Series had a different athlete excel almost every big race. Like if you look at the major Ironmans this year, we had Christian Blumenfeld, we had one, we had Matt Burton win one, we had like the list of names of athletes that won a race was very varied, even in the women's, compared to the T100. Martin Van Riel, Taylor Knibb, with the exception, we had Martin. I know we had Magnus win one, and we had Yuri Kulin win one, but it was very much like sort of became quite apparent, I think, quite early that it was going to be Taylor Knibb and Martin Van Riel winning the whole thing, and yeah, compared to the Pro Series, which has been a bit more edge of his seat nail biting as well, because it's like even now going into Toport next week, there's still a lot of movement. Like, if I actually think that the point chase has been a lot more entertaining in the Pro Series than it has been in the T100 series.
Yeah, I know I can see that. I just think the way they packaged it, they made it, it doesn't capture the same sort of series vibe
At all. No, I agree.
as
Yeah, that's
the
what I'm.
T100.
I think that's what I'm sort of surprised by is because I agree that they haven't set out to do that, and that hasn't been their intention. Maybe they haven't, but me as a viewer, I feel like I've certainly probably followed that more. Whereas the like that's what I'm sort of I guess is that the T100 series that's proactively trying to do that has not been able to because you've had these dominant athletes. Like at the start, it was when Yuri Kulin won Singapore as a wild card, you're like, fucking hell, this is interesting. Like, how's this going to do things? But then very quickly, once Martin came in and once Taylor Knibb started, it was like, no, it's going to be those two. I mean, Julie Daring, I think, certainly gave it a bit of spice at the end, but nobody was catching Taylor Knibb. But that's sort of what I mean is that I agree, and I'm surprised that I got that fix more from the Pro Series that I don't think was necessarily trying to do it then than the 200 series did.
Do you remember who won the first Ironman Pro Series race?
What was the first
Men and
Ironman Pro
women.
Series race?
I'm not going to tell you what it was.
It
I'm
was
just going to
Ironman
ask you.
Texas. It
It's
was
part
Ironman
of my question.
Texas.
It
Ironman.
wasn't.
Oh no, sorry. Oceanside 70.3 was the first race,
There you go.
and it was won by was it Leo Berger in the men's?
No.
No, I actually don't remember.
You know who it was, motherfucker.
Do I?
Yeah.
I don't. Lionel
That
Sanders.
was Lionel
Of
Sanders
course it was. Lionel started this year
and
really
Taylor
strong,
Knibb.
didn't he? Taylor Knibb. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. I know that there was because at the start of the year, that was the race where we had it was like Kat and I think Holly Lauren was that this year or last year? There was that race where we had all those women in transition in T2 together. Is that the one? I don't know. I have Oceanside.
But you're right. There's been quite the range. I mean, if I quickly run through it, you've had Taylor Knibb, Kat Matthews, Paula Finley, Emma Pallant-Brown, Jackie Herring, Ellie Salthouse, Hannah Berry, Paula Finley, Laura Marsden, Kat Matthews, Daniela Lewis, Caroline Pole, Laura Phillip, Marta Sanchez. I mean, it's that's all of your female winners of the Ironman Pro Series
Yep.
in a list, and it's a range. And on the men's side, doing the same: Lionel Sanders, Patrick Land, Sam Long, Nicholas Mann, Matt Hansen, Trevor Foley, Matt Burton, Lionel Sanders, Nicholas Mann, Antonio Lopez, Trevor Foley, Christian Blumenfeld, Pagnotis Bidados, and Mika Newt, Patrick Lang, Gregory Barnaby.
Yeah,
So
like
it is it's a rotating cast of winners, absolutely. And you're right, we have seen, and I think the difference on the Ironman series side is that you have different people racing each race. I know we've seen that in the T100,
mm.
but they have tried to capture the same cast of characters. So you've got those people that are dominating that series are more likely to dominate. On the Ironman Pro Series side, you've got people not racing, people rotating in and out. There have been some consistent players throughout, but I think, yeah, we've seen that variation because of that.
And that variation, the thing that I've one of the things I've spoken about for a long time, probably haven't brought it up as much recently since they split, but one of the things I said early days when we started to this podcast was the idea of triathlon needs to move to the majors concept, more like tennis. We don't need a world title, like we don't need to have the world championship. What we should do is try to do what tennis does. We have the Grand Slams, and the reason always was is you need to give these athletes more than one opportunity to shine. And what I like with the Pro Series this year, and obviously let's pretend that our Mexican friend didn't eat too many eggs and chicken. So let's just put what was his name? Thomas Rodriguez. Let's just alternate universe where suddenly he isn't a filthy drug cheat. We would have had these breakout performances for a hot Trevor Foley. Probably that win in Lake Placid has probably changed the trajectory of his career. Matt Burton, I know, picked up a whole bunch of new sponsors off the back of his win in Ironman Cairns. Lopez, suddenly a name that everybody's talking about, goes into Kona as one of the favorites, thinking that he's going to probably run with Langer. Like we have this group of athletes that, even Gregory Barnaby, who just won in Ironman West Australia, is probably going to win the Pro Series overall. Like we've had these bigger races that have given so many not new athletes, but athletes that don't normally get the spotlight. The spotlight, like I really like that for it is suddenly these events that are getting a lot more attention than you could just go and win Okay, Bart Arnott's won Ironman Cozumel, right? Fantastic for Bart, but it certainly didn't get the cut through that Christian. And again, I understand it's Christian winning in Frankfurt, but like those pros, Trevor Foley winning that Lake Placid with that, what was it, 237 marathon on a nuts course, like that fucking turned heads, mate. Like that got me suddenly paying a lot. Trevor Foley was like I knew Trevor Foley was training with Lionel Sanders, and he was an up and coming younger athlete who had a shit swim. And he did that, and I was like, fucking hell. Like, I started to pay attention to Trevor Foley. There's been a lot of those performances in the pro series, like the T100, Magnus one's like, yeah, okay, Magnus is great. Like, I'm not surprised. Yuri Coolin one, I'm like, yeah, he's been there or thereabouts. Yeah, good for him. Interesting that he won it as a wild card, not a contracted athlete. But then, like, there was no, didn't really change my perspective of anybody. Martin Van Riel's the chosen one. Like, Yella Gaines probably is the exception to that. I think Yella Gaines really, um, Yella Gaines is an athlete that I've been following for a long time because I always thought he had an amazing name. Like, when I first sort of started to really follow short course and stuff. So to see, I wouldn't have picked him to do that. I thought, considering that a lot of the
No.
70.3s he'd done this year, he'd been quite soft. Then he does that and you're like, fucking, okay, boom, you pay attention to him. But that's probably to me the one real big uh, surprise, I suppose, in a lot of ways in the T100 compared to, yeah, Ironman, which had a lot of surprise standout performances, like Matt Burton winning Cairns, the way he did it, where he rode off the front and stayed away all day. It was incredible. Like there's been a lot more of those sort of, yeah, okay, I suddenly have changed my perspective of an athlete, not in a negative
Yeah, I
way.
think we've seen more breakout performances
Mm.
in the Ironman series. But I think, again, I think that's a symptom of them not having a qualification criteria to race their races. So you haven't got a sort of pre-formatted hierarchy of who's on form and who's not.
We also don't always have because I think, yeah, like I just spoke about the dominance of a Martin Van Riel or Taylor Knibb. You don't have those big names in like one of the things I think that we sort of struggle with as a sport sometimes is you can have a couple of athletes that are so strong that it sort of makes the rest of the race irrelevant. And
Yeah.
if I had to have one, and this is of both series, to be honest, all the sport in general, like even the Olympics, even Supertri, like they're not good at showing the stories that aren't at the front of the race. Like they're very bad at like, and I've said this. You watch a T100 race or you watch that. Again, let's just use Ironman Western Australia as an example. If you're not in the front of the race, you don't really see what happens, right? Like, you know, we didn't know that Alistair Branley was sort of coming through in that Dubai race. I mean, we knew that he was making because you could see the splits, but it wasn't until he really got up near towards Kyle Smith and that it actually started to become part of the broadcast. Whereas, there's probably stories of athletes who are going, like Sam Long running through the field. Like there's so many stories that they could tell that they haven't quite worked out how to do that yet. And that always
Yeah.
makes me think that, like I've said, and if you're not in the top five at a T100 race, you might as well not give me three of Dave McNamee's results. Tell me how Leon Chevalier went this year. Tell me how Bradley Weiss went this year. Tell me how, I don't know who's another one. Jason West. Give me Jason West. I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Couldn't tell you.
No. I mean that is probably a byproduct of their both series being so young and not having the money for all the cameras to be on all the
Mm.
course all the time. You watch a Formula One race, every single car has a camera on it, pretty much. So you can flick between every car has a camera on it, has a camera mounted in the cockpit.
Yeah.
You can flick between them as a viewer if you want, but the commentators can weave that narrative because they've got people in the background watching each one and choosing narratives that are going to add to that story. The T100 or the Ironman Pro Series definitely isn't there yet with that. They haven't got that level of production.
Let's now, because we've talked. This is something we've done a lot. We've sort of compared, and I do want to talk about specific races later, but we're sort of doing general overview. We've spoken about T100 versus Ironman Pro Series now. I want to now do a similar thing, but I want to go to short course, and I want to do Supertri versus World Triathlon. What do you think? Do you want to compare those two? Because I think that I would also like to
Yeah.
have a similar discussion about how I think those two races have compared to each other. Because I think that, to be honest, I've been very vocal about my disdain or displeasure or dissatisfaction with the product that World Triathlon puts out. And this year, I think they've done a very good job at improving it. And then Supertri, who I've always sort of been the gold standard this year, have gone to a completely new format, or they've refined a format that they've been trialing for a few years. And, they've really doubled down on the team concept and how that impacted the racing this year. But like, I've watched a lot of World Triathlon events this year, probably more than I have in previous years, plus the Olympics. Like, how would you sort of, reviewing the two and then sort of talking about how they compare to each other and what you think of those two series together?
Yeah, I mean, I would say World Triathlon is greatly improved. It's almost like they were listening to you, mate. I think I think going from where they were and some of the races and events we've seen over the years that have generated that level of criticism from us, it's um it's been night and day, really, what we've seen this year. Some of their events have been fantastic. Obviously, there are still some bad out there, and it depends what level of racing you're watching. But I think some of the major um, races have been really well covered, and I think the Olympics was fantastic.
I feel like the biggest issue I'd have to say, if I had to, like, let's go to the negatives first. I think that the huge problem World Triathlon still has is that pre-Olympics, everything's about the fucking Olympics, right? I was so sick. I was so sick of hearing about Olympic qualification, Olympic qualification, Olympic qualification. This is what they need to do to qualify for the Olympics, Olympic qualification, Olympic qualification. Really making it almost like, I feel like if the World Triathlon Championship Series is their flagship, they present it very much as a stepping stone to the actual championship, which is the Olympics is obviously the biggest deal in the sport. Moving that aside, the racing we saw in World Triathlon was brilliant this year. Compare the biggest challenge I think with World Triathlon is I think their courses are still their weakness. Like I still think that they're struggling to pick.
Without question.
That Cagliari course was dog shit. Like just terrible. The Tour of Milanos Grand Final course, like the bike was a bit technical, but it was just like these flat courses just are just not exciting to me at all. Then if I talk about Supertri, who I still think are the gold standard in terms of broadcast, if nothing else, they've got the best commentary in the sport. Will McCloy is the best. I will, Will, I know you listen, mate. I'm not gonna, I'm not expecting $50 from you. I'm not trying to blow smoke up. Like he genuinely is so good at what he does that he elevates all of the Ironman, T100, World Triathlon. He's that special source that I think automatically gives Supertri an advantage. However, I've seen this year Supertri make a move towards more of those boring ass World Triathlon style courses because both their Chicago and Boston courses and the Neom course are garbage. They're terrible, boring, uninspired. The only good thing about those American courses was at Chicago where they had that little dog leg thing that went down onto the wharf. So they had the little you take that out, it would have been the most boring course in the history of triathlon. It would have literally just been a long out back, long out and back. So I think it's fascinating because they've had some really great courses in the past, and we've seen like Malibu. I'm very happy to see Malibu. I know that it was upsetting to them how it sort of went down with T100 or PTO sort of sharking them a little bit or whatever. But you think about some of those courses we've had in Mallorca, Malta, Jersey.
Yeah.
Those
God,
courses.
Malta was a fucking good.
Fuck, wasn't it good, mate? And then I mean, look, I think Toulouse is still exceptional. I think London is exceptional. But the rest of just like we need, yeah. So that's concerning that there seems to be a bit of a move towards more of those shit courses a little bit. But I think they get away with it because the racing has been so good. The team dynamic this year, in particular, I think with Crown Racing and how Hayden was going to deal with Alex Yee was fantastic. I think that
Yeah.
the way that we sort of that was a great thing to discuss was like he's not going to beat him on the run. So to see Hayden and that team sort of shift tactics and isolate
Yeah, watching
Alex.
them figure that out and decode it was fantastic.
It's probably the best tactical triathlon racing I've seen. Like that single element was probably the best thing to happen in triathlon this year, I think, from
And
a
the beauty of Supertry is that you can follow the narrative through the season. You've got very clear points, very clear standings, who's in it to win it, and who's competing for that win. And then you've got the team dynamic, which adds a third dimension to the whole thing, which is like, how is the team going to help them achieve this? What tactics is that team going to deploy to make it more likely that they're going to reap the points this week? The problem with World Triathlon is I feel every time I watch a World Triathlon race, it's an individual event. I never feel like it's part of a season long narrative ever
mm,
because I find the fucking point system so hard to follow, and I
Arbitrary.
never know who's really gonna. About obviously, you know that someone who's whoever beats the other person is going to get more points than them. That's about it. But it's an individual experience for me. I never feel like it's wrapped in a season-long narrative. Yeah, I hear what you say about the Olympics. That is their golden goose, and you tend to only really get that emphasis in an Olympic year. But even when it's not an Olympic year, it still just feels isolated, siloed, to
Well,
use a really wanky business term.
I love that. But I even think to build on your point is if you look at this year, every year, it's that when you get to the grand final, the fucking maths that you've got Trevor and uh who's the female commentator World Triathlon? Helen? I think it's Helen. Um,
Yeah, maybe.
the maths they're trying to do to explain the point, like this person comes here, it's like fuck that off. But your point about Supertri, now I'm sort of going to go back and we've seen T100 saying they want to try to get that season long narrative, but Supertri do the best at it. They have
Yeah.
consistently got the same, like obviously, I know Alex missed a race and Leo ducked out for a wedding or whatever, but if you had to pick a series, I think Supertri does the best job at consistently getting the same athletes. You've got that thing where you've got, Georgia is in the lead, or Cassandra could come through, or Hayden's at the top. From that point of view, that's another thing they do the best job at. They're the best at getting the consistent same group of athletes and having them race, week in, week out. And what we saw
Yeah, I
this
mean
year,
that is to their to their credit, but also to explain why the other series that last longer can't do it. To Super League is such a condensed period of
mm,
time. You know,
and
you
they're literally a
haven't
traveling
got that.
circus. They all go together. Like it's
Exactly. They're all together. It's a traveling circus. They're not trying to keep hold of athletes that have got other interests at that time of the year. Athletes who race the T100 or the Ironman Pro Series are weaving their way through a season, some straddling both, with other things that are pressing on them as the year goes on.
the other thing about it is because we've also said, I know that I'm not sure if we've had on the podcast, but I know we've certainly discussed this in the WhatsApp group and in real life, is like maybe that season long narrative isn't as important when we look at what happened with T100. But I would then argue that look at the narrative we had this season in Supertri, because I don't think it was as prevalent as World Triathlon, but the Alex versus Hayden thing this year, and the way it started in Boston with Alex, crossing the finish line and doing the crossed arms and Hayden getting the shits, and then you've got the next race where Hayden belts him, and then you've got the next race that Hayden beats. Like that season long narrative shows me that there is value in it because you really wanted to see fucking Alex and Hayden go at it. And like the fact that Hayden had that sort of out of character emotional display was even better. Like it's like, fuck yeah, I want to see these guys. I don't want everybody to go, oh, they're really good mates off. Like the people giving criticism of Alex or so shut the fuck up. We want
Yeah.
more of this.
I
Like,
don't get it. I don't understand it. People celebrate races in different ways.
but like I do think that to me is like I guess if we're doing like a pros and cons, that's an example of how a season long narrative can really work. Like I think if we had have seen. And we sort of got it with the T100 a little bit with Martin versus Kyle versus Rico. We had two races where those guys were super close. But if we had have had, like, let's say round one in Miami, firstly, the lights stayed on. And we had, say, Martin versus Kyle in a ding dong battle. Kyle wins. And then the next week, Martin wins. And then the next week, Rico wins. And suddenly, like, and then the rest of the season is like kind of fucking sign me up. Or Taylor versus, I mean, it felt like
You just don't get the animosity in the long course racing, do you? You don't get any aggravation or friction. It's all very fake friction if you do see it. Um, I can't think of any examples of people getting fucked off with each other.
a couple of years ago, there was the Sam Long, Sam Laidlow thing, which was brilliant. Like that was,
Couple of years ago,
yeah, yeah. I
like
know, I know,
that's
I know,
what
I
I
know.
mean.
And we're still talking
It,
about it. Like we're still talking about it. But like I think that if you talk about the manufactured rivalries, I think if you look at the women's race, it really felt like they were trying to manufacture a rivalry between Ash Gentle and Taylor Knibb. And
yeah,
the only story I think you can really tell there is everybody talked about Ash Gentle being the queen of T100. False. She got Alistair Brown lead in the sense that Ali made Yarn irrelevant at short course, and I feel like Taylor has kind of made Ash a little irrelevant at T100 distance because she just couldn't beat her. Like we couldn't
yeah.
couldn't couldn't
In
beat
that
her.
last race, I thought it was going to be. I thought she cracked that code. I thought she was going to catch her, but then she blew up. She blew up hard.
And
So
again,
yeah, you're right. I think she has kind of she's asserted a level of dominance on that series that you cannot say that anybody else racing that series, if things carry on as they are next season, has a chance of winning that series or even possibly even winning a race.
I think next year, I actually think next year that I like, and I don't, again, I'm sorry, listeners, if this is frustrating. I can't remember the conversations we've had on the podcast or not, but like I've had this discussion with people where I've said, is it that Taylor Knibb is so much better than everybody? Or like, let's say a whole bunch of those like Georgia Taylor Brown, race Bahrain 70.3, crushed it. I think it was the fastest 70.3 female debut on history. Let's say Georgia Taylor Brown steps up to T100 next year. Let's say Laura Lindemann steps up to T100. Let's say Kate Wolf steps up to T100. Maya Kingma steps up to T100. These are athletes that we've seen Taylor Knibb race at short distance and sometimes win, sometimes not win. Try to attack the bike, have her move shut down. Like, is it that she is so dominant, or is it just that she's the first of that group to move across, and suddenly you move, the Sophie Colwells, like all those other athletes come across, and suddenly we have very different racing? Like, what do you think?
I mean, you're going to change the dynamic slightly, but it's not like she was one of the best short course athletes racing short course, and she moved across, and a bunch of her cohorts are going to be moving across to finally rival this great short course athlete. She wasn't that good a short course athlete.
She's pretty good. She,
Yeah, she's
she.
pretty good, but she wasn't. She wasn't, in my opinion, in that conversation, in that sort of upper echelons of short course racing. She was a solid podium top fiver.
I would disagree with a caveat is that I think that if she hadn't of like Taylor Knibb is the Christian Blumenfeld of female triathlon in the sense that she has done the most movement between the distances. She, like I remember when she qualified for the 2021 Olympics because she won Yokohama. Like she fucking exploded onto the scene, mate. Remember it was an automatic qualification event for US and she did. And I was like, who the fuck is Taylor Knibb? And we've seen her like when she's on, she's fucking on. I wonder if
Yeah.
I wonder if she had a focus solely on short course like all those others, whether she would be considered more of a stronger short course athlete. But because she's very quickly, like, when we first even started to hear about Taylor, when she went to the Collins Cup and had that incredible performance, everyone was like, fucking hell. And the word on the street was she's doing the short course for the money, but her passion's in the middle and long distance. So I agree that she hasn't been like, she's not a Cassandra Bergeron, she's not a Georgia Taylor Brown in the world of short course. I wonder if she would have been if she had a focus solely on short course. Maybe not, and maybe we wouldn't talk about it the way we do because she's been so good at the longer stuff that she's done. It's again, so I'm not saying it's. I just think that I do think she
No,
is.
no, I will never
Yeah.
know.
Mm.
We'll never know.
So do you
But
think? Do you
she
think
was
that those
born for
athletes
long
step up?
course racing,
Do you
mid
think
to long
then
course racing.
if we add those athletes to the T100, let's use Georgia as an example, just because she was so fast on debut in Bahrain. You know, do you think that there's if that wave of middle short course athletes does enter the T100 next year, it could be better?
I think it will get more competitive.
Mm.
I still think Taylor Knibb will win.
I'm yeah, I'm not as convinced. I'm of all of them, the name that I would again, I was having this conversation with Macca the other day, and we were talking about the what you look for those short course athletes that sort of do very well at middle distance, and I was saying that you need a certain like you need a certain robustness. They need like certain athletes have a like I look at a Gwen Jorgensen or a Cassandra Bergeron, both Olympic gold medalists, and I wouldn't necessarily expect them to naturally do well at middle distance. Similar to an Alex E versus a Hayden Wild. I would probably pick Hayden Wild to do better at middle distance than an Alex Yee. And there's like a certain robustness that an athlete or like a strength frame or like something about their shape or their size or their muscle mass. I'm not quite sure how to define it, but like I look at a Georgia or like a Taylor Knibb to me looks like a middle distance. Like to me, Taylor Knibb looks like she'd do well at all. Georgia Taylor Brown also looks like an athlete I think could do very well at all distances. Kate Woff, same thing, all distances. An athlete like a Cassandra Bergeron, I'm not sure we're going to ever see Cassandra Bergeron race more than long distance. I think she might be one of those athletes that, like a Gwen, who does tend to focus at the short course stuff and then go off into the sunset. I'm not sure, but yeah, I just think there's something about Georgia Taylor Brown.
Perseverance.
I fully expected to see her like she was an athlete that I always thought would do so well at middle distance, and she just
Yeah,
opted out. She
same.
did she did one little race and then sort of said it's not for me, doesn't interest me. I fucking respect that. Um, I thought she'd be very, very good at middle distance, but yeah, Georgia Taylor Brown, I think, is the one that I would love to see Georgia just go, fuck it, I'm going to middle distance. I've heard, I mean, I'm sure we've all heard the whispers and the rumors, right? That Georgia doesn't, like, she wants to take a gap, a break from triathlon, and she wants to go ride, like, race pro cycling, maybe gravel racing or something like that. I think that'd be devastating. Like, don't do that, Georgia Taylor Brown. Just please come
Yeah,
and race middle distance.
yeah. Careers are short.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, no, so yeah, I do find it. I don't know how we got here, but no, I think that if I had to compare back to the main point we were talking about a little bit, which was this idea of Supertri versus World Triathlon, I think World Triathlon have certainly improved a lot, but I still think they have a long way to go uh, to.
Oh, in my opinion, they've got, yeah, their individual events can be as good as they can get them. They can be as good as they want them to be until they fix some fundamental points about their season and then season-long narrative and how the point system works and how to follow it and how to root for people. Then you won't get them rising to the level of something like Supertry.
Did you do a survey came out this week from Triathlon Live? Did you get that survey?
I did not.
I'll find the link and forward it to you, but it was like asking for feedback about their broadcast. And it was like, how do you rate the commentary? How do you rate? And I gave them some pretty honest feedback. So maybe they're interested, but I think I agree. I think there's some very short-term fixes they could do to immediately make things better, change their commentary, um, or just add a third person on the ground, like have a person with a microphone at transition. I think that that's like just something. Just I don't know, give their commentators a Red Bull before a race starts, like something to
Yeah,
get
it just feels so
boring.
BBC, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. It's very boring. Um,
Mm.
Anyway, we've compared the short course and the long course events to each other. We said we were going to go through some of our highlights of this year and talk about the things. So we've got about 20 minutes left this episode, mate. Let's talk about the things that caught our eye this year, the things of note, just things we'd like to discuss about 2024.
For me, my personal highlight of the year, and it comes from a place of the enjoyable racing, but also the experience on the ground, and that would be the Olympics. I
Man,
thought that day of
100%.
racing at the Olympics where we weren't like all of the noise around it and the river and the moving of the races and it being cancelled and then when it actually came, I know that it's not great for the athletes having race moved. It's all of that. Put that aside, and the fact that both those races were on the same day and the same morning, and we were there to watch them both. It really, from a spectator's point of view, it played out so fucking perfectly. I loved every second of it
I think it
till I
is
suddenly
the.
didn't.
I probably had a slightly better day than you. I think it's probably the best sporting event I've ever been to in my life. Like
I would,
honestly,
yeah, I would
and I thought it was just like that
echo that.
high after the event, thinking I'm so high on it. No, here we are, like months later, and I still think it is the best sporting event I've ever been to in my. And I've been to some, I've been to other Olympic events. I've been to pro cycling race. I've been to grand finals. I've been to some, I always thought it was super try the grand final in 2019. That was pretty hard to beat. We had, Katie, Cassandra sprint finish stuff like that. This to me, hands down, was so great. And I think that, like, yeah, you talk about all that stuff. It was almost like a comedy of errors or a bunch of coincidences led to what ended up being this ideal thing. I think having both races on the same day was exceptional.
Yeah,
I I I I think the Olympics need to stick to that. I think that you just ended up having a super crowd for it. I think you still would have had a great crowd for both, but the fact that even the fact that like just little things, right? Like between the two races where our partners went and got snacks, and then we sat on the side of the course and we were having a little French picnic with baguettes and cheese and those delicious tomatoes that we all were obsessed with. But then we'd start to talk to other people. We were having conversations. We got to know the other people that were around us and talking about their experience, like why they're watching the race,
yeah.
how
It
they,
created a more of a community feel.
yeah, it
Like you
did.
say, it was a super crowd. It was the crowd. Those people that would have been there for both anyway were there. Then you had the addition of the people that were only coming for one, the men's or the women's. So you had this kind of those core people who were just triathlon fans. Then you had the people that were watching the men's race and the people that were watching the women's race, and it all culminated in one big group of people screaming
Oh man.
down at these athletes as they went by. And I've never felt an atmosphere like it. It was like a Mexican wave of power.
It still gives me goosebumps. Like literally, I don't know if you can see of when Cassandra won the race and the entire crowd just started singing the French national anthem. Like it gives me goosebumps just thinking about how cool that. Or when you'd have Leonie Perriot coming through and the entire
Yeah.
crowd, you could tell she was coming because the entire crowd would just start cheering her name. Man, it was and then the way the races went, like I still cannot believe the way the men's race finished. That was and like I've rewatched it. I was talking with us because we talked about Will just previously, but I was in Thailand recently with Will for a week and we were talking a lot about this stuff. And I told him how good a job he did commentating and how it was so cool because we were watching the race in Paris with his commentary going. And we are talking about that finish. And I think he did an excellent job. And he's like, mate, it was so difficult because you didn't know what was going on. Like, and it's true because I still think that if you watch that footage of the pass, I still remember when it happened with me and you. And I said, that's not Hayden. Like that's a lapped
Yeah, you
athlete.
said that's not Hayden, that's Berger.
Or they're passing because he just went backwards so badly. The fact that it then was Hayden, you're like again, the biggest race on the biggest stage with all the drama. If you wrote a script, you wouldn't have written that. You wouldn't have written that. It was better. It
No,
was a
no,
better finish
no, no.
than I could
If
have
I had
imagined.
to like, if I'd written that this is the race and how it's going to play out, Hayden's going to have this big a lead, you'd have just been like, no, he's not.
Mm.
No, he's not. He's not going to get that big a lead. That's ridiculous. That's we can't play it out like that.
Well, even having conversations with a unnamed member of his team pre-race and like understanding that I guess the plan that Hayden had to then see him go and do something completely different, even you're like, this isn't like yeah, it was brilliant. It was so good. I don't just want to talk about the Olympics though, because we're like I think we've spoken about the Olympics a lot, and I have a spoiler alert feeling that it's probably going to feature heavily in our podcast awards. Um, what are some of the other events, races, moments, performances, things you've seen this year that really caught your attention or impressed you? Because I have a bucket load actually that just come to mind straight off the top of my head.
Yeah, I really enjoyed T100 Singapore watching it.
Hmm.
I thought that was the race where I saw their sort of broadcast come together a little bit, and I thought that the race venue really suited a TV audience.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed being at the London Team 100 race. I thought my experience racing that event was really good fun. And being there and watching the race, I think they've got some work to do in terms of that venue, making it. It's certainly not, to use another wanky business word, that event venue is not scalable, in my opinion.
Mm.
You double, triple, quadruple the size of that crowd. It's gonna be a fucking nightmare getting people
Maybe
around
remove the
that venue.
construction. Maybe it's a bit better. I think there was just a lot of construction happened that probably,
Yeah, maybe,
yeah.
maybe. But, there was one set of stairs to get down to where the swim start was. You start trying to put a huge volume of people through that, it's going to be diabolical.
I think like there's that race had probably one of my performances of the year, which was Sam Laidlow. His T100 London performance changed my thoughts about Sam Laidlow. Not that I've ever disliked him or anything. I think he's obviously a defending, previous world champion. But I think started to notice more the way that he races, and I really I've I'm a much bigger Sam Laidlow fan now than I was this time last year, and I think it's that you saw that way that he does really like he takes big swings. We saw it in Kona and he missed, but we saw it in London and it worked, and I love that approach to racing that he has, where it is like, I'm not gonna fucking be conservative here. I'm gonna take this thing on and try to race it. I think we didn't see it at the start of this year very much from him, or maybe we did, maybe Miami where he, capitulated. That's him doing it. Yeah, that performance for me was a real sort of shifting point this year where I've gone from being like, yeah, Sam, but to suddenly be like, fucking hell, I actually really like watching Sam Laidlow. Like, I'm more excited about a race that has him on the start list now because of the way that he approaches the racing. I thought his London performance was phenomenal, like really, really, really. And that race with him and Kyle, and then you had Daniel. The fact you had Daniel Beckergaard, who we're both huge fans of Daniel. See Daniel come through for the podium, and that's probably his performance of the year. Was really, really great. That was a London was a big highlight for me this year.
Another highlight for me would be the end of the men's race at Escape from Alcatraz. I thought
Yeah, yeah, of
that sprint
course.
finish
Yeah.
was just amazing.
Mm. Other weird ones that I really enjoyed this year, like maybe I've really enjoyed that Uzbekistan Challenge Samarkand race that you had Christian and Gustav and Rico at. I think that's probably the surprise, like kind of unsung hero, a little bit of pro triathlon this year. I thought they did. I mean, again in Thailand I was with Belinda. I think that weekend for Challenge we had Challenge Beijing, which I think was exceptionally well broadcast, and then you had Challenge Samarkand, which I was so impressed with the broadcast. Like they were two races this year that also really impressed me. And we had that great race in the women's race where I think it was Paula Finlay who won it. But you had again, as she seems to do most races she's in, Julie Darren running through the field, chasing down that podium, and I think she finished second. And then in the men's race, you had Kyle and Henry and Mark Dubrick. Uh, Again, that was a great race. And then Challenge Samarkand, where Rico Bogan went off the front, and you had Christian run him down, and then Gustav run him down at the back end, and you had Laura Madsen, who is probably my rising star for this year, sort of do her thing in the women's race. Like they were two races that like relatively unsung race that I really really enjoyed this year. They're definitely highlights for me.
Yeah.
Cool.
What
Um,
else have I got?
Yeah, what else have you got? I mean,
What else have I got? I
you
mean,
spoke about T100 London being like the live experience. I had that in Cairns this year when I went up and raced. I did the Cairns 70.3. It was the Ironman Pro Series Ironman race. We had Matt Burton won it and Hannah Berry won the women's race. But that was a really great experience for me. And that was probably not so much about the spectacle of it, but more being around that Ironman environment that I've sort of not been as present at the last few years with a few injuries and stuff. So that was a really good in-person experience for me, and it certainly got my hunger for it back a lot. And again, I think the racing ended up being really really good, where you had Matt out the front, Braden, and then Mike nearly running Braden down at the end, and Hannah running through the field to win the thing. Like that was a really good experience for me. Sorry, just to jump in.
yeah, I think obviously the the two experiences I had with the Ironman World Championships this year, being on the ground in Nice, watching the women's race, it was great. It was a great race, but it was a bit sobering in terms of the amount of people on the ground. It didn't feel like as bigger an event as I thought it would do. And then contrasting that to Kona, even though I wasn't on the ground, what we saw roll out there was just so brilliant in terms of the race itself and how it unfolded.
That's a really because I know that in our group, Tom Epton was recently talking about how good he thought the women's race was in Nice. And I was like, mate, what are you talking about? Like I was Laura Phillip was so dominant. And again, no disrespect to Kat, but the fact that Kat Matthews was cramping and walking and still finished second comfortably. Like I just think the gaps in the women's race in Nice was it was too big. And it didn't seem I don't know, it really felt like a lesser event to me. And that's not the women's fault. It was just like, so many of the star athletes either didn't race or pulled out last minute or got a flat tire in the start of the bike. And like there was a lot of stuff working against the women's race, which I feel it's not fair. Like I feel like they were sort of disserviced a little bit. And I'm not blaming it on Nice. I just think it was like a whole range of factors. But then, as you say, you contrast it to the men's, and I think that men's Kona race, the best Kona race we've seen in a very, very long time. And we've spoken
Too
ad
right.
nauseum about it was just an old school slugfest. Like there was no finesse.
Yes.
There wasn't the Jan Frodeno 2019 finesse. There wasn't the Gustav Eden masterclass of 2022. There wasn't the Lucy Charles performance from last year. This was a fucking heavyweight slugfest, 15 rounder. Two people just barely on their feet, taking swings at each other to see who fall over. It was fucking incredible. It
And
was
the
yeah,
the two events contrasting as they did have managed to totally change my mind
yeah.
on where I think the World Championship should be. And I think it should be in Kona. And I think both races should be on the same day or maybe neighboring days or something like that. I mean, it doesn't change my opinion on that. Maybe we don't need a World Championship. Maybe, like you say, we need sort of a tennis approach to things. But I just, and Kona will always be Kona, in my opinion. And that will stand, but it's kind of like winning. and it stands on its own 2 feet as a race. But it has changed my opinion from someone who you would argue, well, the World Championship can be anywhere as long as you try and find a stunning venue. I watched a race like that was all play out this year, and you just think, oh, I don't think this would happen anywhere else.
You're again, and I think that I think it's I think it's actually good to admit when you think you're wrong, and I think you're right. I think I was a bit because I've been very vocal about liking the fact that they're changing locations and that, and I know a lot of people have in the like I know like Macca for example, Chris has been the his whole career he would always say that if they moved this race somewhere else, I'd have won it 100 times or whatever. Even him coming out and saying fuck that, it has to be Kona. Like you're right, that Kona race this year made me go, yeah, I'm wrong. I'm happy to I mean I'm not I hate it, but I think you're right. I think I'm happy that my mind has been changed. Not that I've always thought Kona was really, really special. I've just always said I don't think it's the Kona-ness that makes it a world championship. But no, if that's what they're going to do, it has to be Kona, mate. It has to be there because it was just so good. And yeah, I can't even, it was just the blow-ups, mate. Like it really was. You wouldn't have thought they were wearing super shoes, right? You wouldn't have thought they're wearing this age where the people just running on springs because everybody, like there was not apart from Patrick. You take Patrick Langer out of that thing, like it just wasn't a pretty run. Like it was just a
Well,
fucking
I know, hang on,
slugfest.
don't forget Cam Worth, a
Of
man
course,
waking his way through the field like an old school fucking legend.
yeah, but yeah, I just think it was kind of was an absolute highlight for me. I think it's also like I think we've seen the Olympics was exceptional this year. And then Kona was exceptional this year. Like we really did get some great moments. Um,
And if you think about it, like in terms of triathlon as a sport, we're both fearful about where the sport's going.
mm,
Is it going to survive? Certainly from like a sponsorship and a promotion standpoint, and who's willing to invest in the sport. There's worrying signs ahead. But from a race moments perspective, this year has really come to the party.
I think it's glimmers of hope, right? It's like you're panning for gold, and I think we saw some decent nuggets of gold with again. I think that World Triathlon need to look at what happened at the Olympics and understand that it's not the Olympics, but what can they learn from that? Like they need to take lessons away from that and see how they can do something because it was exceptional. And then yeah, Ironman very much need to go. Okay, this is it. Yeah, we need to. I don't know how they do it. I'm not sure, but they need to really go back to the drawing board a little bit. I think because yeah, it was good. Now, just we are literally about to wrap up, mate. So the last thing I just want to say is I sort of spoke a little bit about Sam Laidlow being an athlete that really impressed me this year. Who are some of the other athletes or specific athletic performances that really stood out to you this year?
Carl Smith, I thought he's had a blinder.
In general, or just was there a specific thing that he did that really sort of got your attention? Or
Obviously that sprint finish at Alcatraz was what really turned my head. But I think he's had a year where he's come to the party to say what I said earlier. Obviously Martin Van Riel has just blown me away with his performances in the T100 when he got there. A lot of love for Rico Bogan.
he's
It
mine, I
was,
think.
yeah.
Like, we knew Rico was a 70.3 champion last year, and we were a bit like, never heard of him. Like, wow, well done, congratulations. But like, we've said it, and people are probably sick of us saying it. Like, I'm excited when he's on the start list because he will always make an impact on a race. So
Oh yeah.
he's,
I mean, I remember when he won the 70.3, the first thing we said on that week's podcast was Rico who? Like, who the
uh,
fuck is this guy? And he's
yeah,
really applied himself, and he's like you say, he's come and he's made an impact.
women's race, women in particular this year that have really sort of like Kat Matthews. Again, I have to praise her because
Yeah.
she's exceeded what I didn't think was possible. Like, when we sort of, I think we even might have been a bit like, is she serious? Is she think like she has done exceptionally this year at balancing everything? Like, I still am just in awe of it. Laura Madsen, an athlete that is a huge rising star for me. The athlete that I think, though, that if I had to say has like matured the most or has moved into the position that I've always thought that they occupied, it's Cassandra Beaugrand because she has always been to me that true world class athlete, and we've always seen that she's too inconsistent. And this year that's gone. She has just, I'm the Olympic champion now. I am going to win any race that I want to, basically. And that's been fantastic to see. So Cassandra Beaugrand's
Yeah. And Georgia
huge.
Taylor Brown as well.
Good to
You
see her
know,
back. I think good to see her come back
Yeah,
from, a
exactly.
devastating
And also
injury.
someone else I want to mention is Flora Duffy. You know, making the switch over from the short course to long course and finishing fifth in the T100 series. Really watching her figure it out has been a pleasure.
And look, just Christian as well. I think that, what people would say was a bad year for him, or a lot of people said he's failed this year. I still see so much potential, and I'm so excited for Christian. I'm glad that he's not going to pro cycling. Yeah, he gets me excited about the sport as he always has, and that Frankfurt performance just was like fucking let's go. Can't wait for next year.
Man can't grow a proper beard though, can he?
Oh, fucking terrible, terrible, mate.
Fucking chin strap.
Just give it up, give it up. Um, Second worst facial hair behind Chase McQueen. That guy has the worst facial hair in triathlon. Um, that's it, mate. We're done. Next week so we will go away. We will put together a list of nominees and categories. If anybody has any ideas, put them on the YouTube video. It's race of the year, performance of the year, athlete of the year, the Lionel Award for chucking a Lionel. Those sort of standard awards we give it every year. So feel free to give us your thoughts on the YouTube channel. That's the best place to put them. WhatsApp group for our patrons. But James, if people want to find out more about Talking Triathlon, where do they need to go?
If you want to support the show, jump on at patreon.com/talking triathlon. If you want to follow Tim, he's at T14 on Instagram, and I'm at bale.james85 on Instagram. Find us on at Talking Triathlon on Instagram. And if you join the Patreon group, you get access to the monthly bonus episode, and you'll get access to the three weekly episodes that will cover the Christmas period to keep you full of triathlon content. And we'll put you in the WhatsApp group and the social group. And the WhatsApp group keeps the flame burning, mate.
It certainly does. James Bale, it is a pleasure. Guys, thank you for listening. As I said, head to youtube.com, whatever, search Talking Triathlon. Subscribe, like the videos, give us your thoughts. Let us know what are the outstanding performances for you this year. We certainly prefer the positive comments, so keep those ones coming. But until next week, Jimbo, I'll talk to you later.
Cheerio.